In this video, we're going to take a look at writing another graphical user interface program for C#. We will be making the game Tic Tac Toe. This video will be going over how to declare and initialize an array of characters, as well as writing a custom void method that checks to see whether player 1 or 2 won, or if there was a tie at the end of the game. The first thing we need to do is import some pictures, such as the background, the letter X, and the letter O. Now you can use a label if you want to do that, but I think pictures look nicer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Project, scroll all the way down to the properties. Over here you're going to see Application, Build, Build Events. What we're looking for is Resources. So we're going to click on Resources. We're going to change the strings to images because that's the resource we want to add. We're going to click this down arrow and we're going to add existing file. You can hold Shift and you can select all of them. You're going to hit Open, and now we have our background, our O, and our X in our program. Just a friendly suggestion, it is best to keep all your file images or all your resources as lowercase letters, because if you don't make it lowercase and you have uppercase later on, if you don't type in an uppercase letter, it's going to say that resource is not found. So let's swing back over to our form here. What we're going to do is we're going to bring up the properties, where the first thing we're going to do is change that form name, not the text, but the actual name. We're going to use that prefix FRM, and we're going to call it main. So FRM main. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the text to Tic Tac Toe. And once it's spelled correctly, we'll see we have that right up there. The next thing I need to do is I need to put in that background image on my form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up. Here's background image. It's going to bring up this. Now, by adding it to my resources, it's not embedded into the project. And because it's not embedded into the project, it'll actually save some space. So when you're looking at local resources versus your project resource, if it's a local resource that you import, that's going to take up more space in your program. It also will not allow you to change things out unless you have access to the source code. So what we're going to do is we're going to click OK. You'll notice my tic-tac-toe board is not showing up the way I want it to. That's okay. We're going to change this background image layout from tile to stretch. Now, no matter what size I make my form, it will also automatically adjust. I like that size right there. Doesn't need to be huge. The next thing I need are picture boxes. I'm going to open my toolbox. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to get one picture box here. Now I am going to need 9, but what I want to do is make sure all the picture boxes are of the same size and they have the same properties. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this picture box and then I'm going to resize it. Now I don't want it to be gray because that's just not going to look good. So what I'm going to do first though, I need to rename this picture box. I'm going to call this PIC-TL, which stands, the PIC, P-I-C stands for picture box. TL stands for top left. So I'm looking at the picture box in the top left. I'm going to scroll up here and I'm going to change the back color from control. Click on web, transparent. Now it'll look like it's blank when I run my program. The next thing I need to do is I need to scroll down to size mode. I want the size mode to also be, there it is, stretch image. I want the image to stretch, so no matter what size I decide to make the picture box, I don't have to go in and resize it or automatically adjust it for me, the actual image, not the size of the picture box. Once I have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control C, Control V. I'm going to move this picture box up right here, kind of try to put it in the middle. And all I'm going to do, because it has those same properties, is change its name. I don't want to leave it as picture box 1. I want to do PICTM. I'm going to do it again, and this time I'm going to do it for the top right, because all of these now have the same properties. So let's go ahead and fast forward where we do the middle and the bottom and have that done. Now all our picture boxes are set up. We need to click on each of them and make sure they're in the right location. I don't want to have top middle somewhere in the bottom, and when I click on that, it loads a picture somewhere else. So what I want is I'm going to have pick TL for top left, TM for top middle, TR for top right. I used M for middle, so I have pick ML for middle left, pick MM for middle middle, MR for middle right, and then I use B for bottom. We have the bottom left, the bottom middle, and the bottom right. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure my program actually closes when I click this X button. So I'm going to click on my form one time, make sure this little lightning bolt is selected, and I'm going to scroll right down here to where it says form closing. I'm going to double click, and that'll bring me to my code where I can do my form closing. I'm going to type in application.exit. I want to get in the habit of doing that because if I have multiple forms, I want the entire application to exit. We're going to go ahead and save. Now what we need to do is we need to create some global variables that can be used across all our various methods. For the global variables to be used across all methods, we want to put them inside our public partial class. This is where it goes. The first thing I'm going to need is an integer to represent player turn. Now I don't have to spell player turn correctly, but it'll be a lot easier to code if I do. The next thing I'm going to need is an array of characters. Now CHR does stand for characters. To make an array, I use a set of brackets. I do not dimensionalize the size, and I give it a name. I'm going to call mine letter, because each index 1 through 9 is going to hold a certain letter. Now index 1 is going to be the top left, index 2 is going to be the top middle, index 3 the top right, 4, 5, and 6 will handle the middle, 7, 8, 9 handle the bottom. It's going to look just like a number keypad. The next thing I need to do is I need to dimensionalize the size of my character array. So I do letter equals new char, and then I'm going to do 10. I'm not going to do 9. If I do 9, that gives me index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I want to use index 1 through 9 and actually omit index 0. Now I want to touch on these global variables for a moment. When you are using this in C, if you do not put anything in front of these, they will be private by default. It is good practice to go ahead and start putting in the word private in front of these, because C# is an object-oriented programming language. So when you create these, get in the habit of using private. If you do not put private, it doesn't matter. They will still work, but it's common practice when using C# to use the keyword private. What we can do now is we can program each picture box. When we're coding the picture boxes, you want to make sure you're in the right section of your code. One of the easiest ways to make sure you're in the right section of your code, you're just going to double click the picture box you're working on. We'll do a few together because the code is essentially the same. So let's go ahead and start with the top left picture box. I'm in the right spot because it says private void pick TL. So I'm in the right spot and I can code it. If it is player 1's turn, there are a couple things that need to happen. One, we need to load the image of an X. We need to assign index 1 to an X because we can't compare pictures. And the third thing that needs to happen is we need to switch from player 1's turn to player 2's turn. Then we're going to do the same thing for an O, but we're just going to reverse it. So we're going to start with an if statement. The first thing we're going to do is check to see if player turn is equal to 1. If it is, three things need to happen. The first thing is I need to load that image. So I'm going to do pick tl.image equals. Now, if you're coming from VB, so it's been my.resources. It's very similar, except for this time it's going to be properties.resources and then the X, or whatever you called your X picture. I need to set that array index 1 because that is the upper left-hand corner. To an X. Now, when I do it to an X, it needs to be a single quotes here, not double. If I try to do it in double quotes, which are for strings, it's going to tell me that it's not allowed. I have a red line. So I need to put a single set of quotes there. And the last thing we need to do is set player turn equal to 2 with a single set of equal signs because we're assigning 2 to the player turn variable. Now there's one other possibility, so I need to use else, because if it's not player 1's turn, it's got to be player 2's turn. So I'm going to do pick tl.image equals, and that's going to be my properties dot resources, and instead of x, it's going to be o, not a 0, but an actual o. Then I'm going to set letter 1 equal to o, not x, but o. And then the last thing I need to do is set player turn equal to 1. Now, if I want to, I can copy and paste this code right here, and I am. I'm going to copy and paste this code. I'm going to move, because all the code is essentially the same. I'm going to move to my top middle. I'm going to paste my code, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to update specific things. Now, when you're copying and pasting, make sure you update everything. If you do not update everything, your code's not going to work. So there are benefits and drawbacks to copying and pasting your code. So this time, instead of pick TL, I'm going to do pick TM. I still want to load that X. Index 2, I want to be an X. Player turn needs to reset to player 2. So that's all I need to update. Just updating 4 lines of code. Then I'm going to do the top right. And we're going to do the same thing for all of these. So I'm going to change TL to TR because I'm in the top right picture box. What index represents the top right? That is index 3. So I'm going to change that in 2 places. One for player 1, the second one for player 2. So let's fast forward where all these are done. Once you have coded out your picture boxes, the last thing you need to do for the picture boxes is test and make sure they work. Now on the bottom right, I've made an error on purpose so you can see and hopefully identify if you're getting any errors where they're occurring. So I should have an X followed by an O, I do, followed by another X. So it's alternating X and O's just like it's supposed to, which means my player turn is working. Now I got 3 X's in a row, but I haven't coded out the check win. We're going to do that in just a moment. I also haven't coded out where when we click it, it won't change. We'll do that at the very end. Now this one, when I click the bottom right, because there's an error, and hopefully you're not encountering this error, but it is a common one that happens. Notice it's changing the top left picture box. I don't want that happening at all. So there's a couple things I need to do. The first thing I need to do is identify where that error is taking place. Well, it's happening when I click on the bottom right picture box. I want to make sure this is the bottom right picture box. I double click and it says pick BR. So I know I'm in the right spot. So I know there's a problem with my code. If player turn equals 1, then pick TL. I don't want to change the top left image. I want to change the bottom right image. I also want to check the index 9. Okay, everything looks good, but I also want to check it for player 2. Top left, that needs to be bottom right, not index 1, but index 9. Once we have that, we're good to go. Now, the next thing I need to do is I need to create a custom method that checks for the win. Now I'm going to do public void because it's going to be a procedure, it's not going to return anything, and I'm going to call it check win. That's going to be my custom method that's going to check for the win. If I do not create a custom method, I'm going to have to check the win inside each individual Tic Tac Toe box. It is impossible for me to know what's going to be the last box they click on. So I need to check for the win every single time this happens. So I need to check the horizontal. So I'm going to say check horizontal for player 1. Then I need to check the horizontal for player 2. Now, I don't need this documentation, but by putting in documentation, it allows me to be able to easily section out my code and to have it organized so if there's an error, I can easily see where my code is. I don't have a bunch of code running together. So we're going to do if letter index 1 equals X. Now, in C#, there is no and also operator. And also is more efficient than and. They don't have an and also operator. So if you're coming from Java, you may know that a single ampersand means and, a double ampersand means and also. In C#, there is no and also. A single ampersand means the and bitwise operator. Well, we're not using an and bitwise operator. If you don't know what it is, that's okay. That's for a different video, but we need a double ampersand because we're checking for multiple conditions. Index 1, index 2, and index 3 are all x's. So I use my double ampersand, letter, I'm checking index 2, make sure that's equal to an x, and you want to put it in the right spot. And I need to check index 3 equal to an x. Now, I just made an error on purpose, and it's a common error that can happen. Here, it'll say, let's see here, it says bool operator equal operator and cannot be applied to operands of type bool and character. Well, we have a single equal sign, we need a double equal sign checking for equality. Now, if going across the top row, index 1, 2, and 3 are x's, we're going to do message box dot show, and we're going to say player 1 wins. Now, I need to do else if, because I got to check 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, and 9. So all I'm going to do is put an else in front of this, and then we'll discuss why you want to do else if in just a moment. In case you're new to programming, or maybe you're taking it for the first time in college and your professor has chosen C# to be your first language. And if you already know, well, then you already know. If you know, you know. So then we have else if here. All right, so everything is looking good. Okay, so player 1 wins. Oh, we got to put in these semicolons. So we make that error one time, and we copy and paste. We're going to have it multiple times. So that is for player 1. Now, if I do not use else if, I could use single if statements for each of these, and I could do that. My program will work without a doubt because there's only one way to win or tie in Tic Tac Toe. But I want to use else if. The difference between if and else if statements, again, is that when I use else if, it's going to check each of them until it finds the first one that evaluates to true. Once it does that, it will not bother checking the rest of them. Now, if I do put in if statements, as soon as it evaluates the first one that is true, it will continue checking the rest of them. I want my code to run efficiently, so I'm going to use else if. I'm going to copy and paste this code. We're going to do the horizontal together for player 2. Then we'll fast forward where all of it is done. And all I'm going to do is change these X's to O's. That's all I'm going to do. Change them to O's for the top row. Change player 1 wins to player 2. I'm going to do the same thing for the middle row. Index 4, index 5, and index 6. By using an array, this makes it so much easier to keep track of where everything is and what's what. It also creates unnecessary repetitive variables. So that's how you do the check win. So what we're going to do is code out the rest of them, code the tie together, then we need to call upon it so it runs every time. Let's fast forward to where that is done. Once you have your check win coded out, you want to go through and make sure you have everything. For example, here I have zeros. I need to put an O. That's the first thing I need to fix here. And then the next thing I need to do is check and make sure I have all else if statements. I should have one single if statement and then one single else if statement. In here you can see I have if, else if, followed by another if. I want all of these to run just one time. Not all of them. At the most, I want them to run one time, and that's if at the end, if none of them have run, they all run. So I'm going to make sure I have all my else if statements, making sure my code runs. I have my documentation checking vertical for player 2, which is index 1, 4, and 7, 2, 5, and 8. 3, 6, and 9. It's looking pretty good. Checking my indexes for player 1. And it doesn't take long to check because the one thing you don't want to do is test every single win possible and then figure out one of them is messed up. You want it to be as smooth as possible. For the diagonals, there's only 2 ways to win. That's an index 1, 5, and 9, 3, 5, and 7 going diagonally to the right or to the left. I have the O's, and then for player 2 wins. Oh, need an else if there, and then I need it right up here. So I think that's all of them. And double check, like I just said. It doesn't take long to check. We want to make sure all of these are else if, with the exception of the first. Now, you may be thinking for the tie that we can simply use an else statement. That's not going to work, unfortunately, because we're going to have to call the check win sub every single time somebody clicks on a box, because we don't know what is going to be the last box they click on. So what we need to do is not use else, but else if. Now, you can have a long if statement here, checking to see that nobody has one, checking all the tiles. What we're going to do is simply count how many tiles have been played. So what we're going to do is we're going to do, go back up to the top. We're going to create a variable called, so we're going to do private int, we'll do played. We're going to set that equal to 0. Now, every time somebody clicks on one of the tiles, we're going to increment it by 1. So we're going to do two things in each of these methods for the picture boxes. We're going to increase the amount of played tiles by 1, and we're going to call check win. So I'm going to do played plus equals 1, and then all I'm going to do is call my check win, and we're good to go. And you want to do it with the set of parentheses, not with a parentheses and an underscore. Now all I need to do is copy and paste that into each of these. Make sure they're not inside your if or else if statement. We want them to run every single time. So we're putting it right outside that else statement. We don't want to call check win prematurely. We want to call it after all the updates in the picture box have been done. If we call it early, it's going to give us an error, or not an error, it's not going to work. It's going to be a logic error. It's not going to work the way we intend it to work. So we're just going down the list here. List of picture boxes. Technically not a list, but the picture boxes on the form, bottom middle, and then bottom right. Okay, perfect. Says we got some errors here. Okay, perfect. So else if, and that's fine. Now, if nobody has one, and this has to go in a specific spot, because remember, with else if, as soon as it encounters one that's true, it doesn't check the rest of them. So we want this one to go at the very bottom. So we're going to do else if played equals 9. If it does, then we're going to say message box dot show. We want to show that message box, it is a tie. There we go. And we're going to put that semicolon, and we are good to go. Now, we've called the check win. We have everything we incremented. So let's see if a tie works here. So there's a couple things we're going to test. Now, we need to technically test all of it and find out what's happening. So XOX, perfect. OXO. Now I want to test for a tie first. So I'm going to put my X here, my O here, and I still can't even get a tie even when I try, but this will test diagonally and to the right. Player 1 wins. Okay, perfect. What we're going to do now is we're going to try to test for a tie. So let's do XOX, XO. Then we'll do an X here, an O, and then an X. So it is a tie. Perfect. So it is working. The last thing we need to do is change it so they cannot change one of the picture boxes. So let's take a look at how to do that now. So the last thing we need to do is disable each picture box, because once they click on it, they shouldn't be able to click on it again and change it from an X to an O or an O to an X. So we're going to do that right after this else statement, right before we call the check win. So what we're going to do is we're going to do, this is the bottom right, so I'm going to do pick BR dot enabled equals false. And I have done that in my other methods already for each of those picture boxes. So you want to make sure it becomes enabled. The last thing you may want to do is restart your application. When you want to restart your application, there's a couple of ways to do it. So you would type this one line of code into each of these. You would do application .restart. Now what this will do is it will essentially create a new instance of the form. The old one will eventually close. Now because we have application.exit and the closing section of our code that we did at the very beginning of the video, when it starts that new instance of the application and closes the window, it will also exit the instance of the old application. So let's see it in working. Now you would need to put this in each instance of the win. We're going to test it across the top, and then we're going to go ahead and close the video. So we're going to do X, O, X, O, X. Player 1 wins, and then it should restart the application, and it does. So you essentially can play again and again and again. Hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to help the channel grow, and we'll see you guys in the next programming video.